are talking politics with Melanie Verwoerd, political analyst and former ANC Member of Parliament and South African Ambassador to Ireland. Melanie, everyone had high hopes that President Zuma might be removed over this weekend meeting of the ANC's NEC, only to be disappointed again. Were you surprised by the inaction of the NEC?
No, I really wasn't. I had heard before the weekend that the anti-Zuma camp was trying and struggling to get about 30 voices to speak out. And of course, it isn't just a question of voting. You know, the ANC doesn't vote. It is about who has the majority voice and the strongest voice, and then they will discuss it and come to some form of consensus. But if you struggle to get 30 voices over an NEC that's more than 100 people, then you know that the numbers are not in your favor yet. It is significant, and we have seen some movement, but it was very clear to me that President Zuma was going nowhere.
Where does his support still come from in the NEC?
Well, he has a lot of supporters in the NEC. I mean, the NEC was loaded, if you want to call it that way, from the start. After Mangaung, with more of his supporters. We know, and that's got partly to do with the fact that KZN was the strongest bloc at that stage, because he had spent a lot of time, some people say money, but a lot of time in building up those branches over a period of time. So they were by far the biggest delegation that came, and therefore a lot of his supporters came in on the NEC, and that continues to be the case. Of course, now there's an entrenchment that has happened. People benefit from their association with them. Some are scared of him because he might know things about them. And so now there's an entrenchment that's happened, and people not only want to keep him in, but they also want to keep the current status quo of power balance on their side.
You've touched on this now, but yesterday Secretary General Gwede Mantashe told the media that the ANC's NEC doesn't function as a disciplinary committee that can simply discipline or remove a member that steps out of line. Tell us a bit more about this. How are decisions made, and especially when it comes to something as a motion, like a motion of no confidence?
Look, so I think it's quite important to understand how the NEC operates internally. Of course, there's formal agenda items, and that's why Gwede Mantashe could say before, as he was going into the meeting, it's not on the agenda 3 times, but of course indicating by saying it so pointedly that it most probably will come up in the context of another discussion. So how most ANC meetings, not only the NEC meetings, will work is everybody who wants to talk gets a chance to talk. People talk at length. That's why ANC meetings always goes on for hours, sometimes for days. And then in the end, I have never experienced it. It might have happened once or twice, but I've never experienced it in an ANC meeting that people actually vote by a show of hands. So people will, at the end, usually you get one person standing up and trying to summarize and saying, let's agree that this is the consensus. If they usually then cannot get a consensus, or if there's a lot of murmuring going on that that's not the consensus, the ANC will tend to then say, let's just agree on a process, how to take that forward. And we heard some of that this weekend. There will be more discussions around certain things. People will talk, you'll put up subcommittees, etc., etc. So it's not a question of just voting, and that's what people get wrong when they start calculating numbers. It's kind of irrelevant in a way. So that's the first thing. The second thing is people don't get disciplined at the NEC meetings, nor will they decide. The NEC is the highest governing body. They can ask for disciplinary proceedings to be started against somebody, a member of the ANC, but it then is a very formal process described by the ANC Constitution. And the ANC Constitution then says that there has to be a charge sheet, it has to come from the disciplinary committee from the ANC, etc., etc. And of course, the disciplinary committee at the moment is chaired by Derek Hanekom. And then it's a very formal process, and people get represented. It's not by a lawyer, but by somebody else in the ANC. They can also appeal the ruling, etc., etc. So it is not for the NEC to discipline people, even though they can ask for disciplinary proceedings to be instituted. The motion of no confidence is, of course, it depends if you're talking about the parliamentary one or one inside the ANC. So within the ANC inside, I don't believe there was a motion of no confidence. Again, it relates to how the ANC operates in their meetings. Most likely, and that's my understanding how it would happen, is that somebody, in this case John Netachenji, would have said, Look, there are some issues here. There is a restlessness in society. It would usually be a well-motivated point that gets made. And therefore, we believe that it might be time, or some of us believes that it might be time for the president, for the bigger good of the ANC, to consider stepping down. It's not a formal motion. It's not a motion in the sense of a parliamentary motion of no confidence. It's an issue that gets raised. It is a request almost rather than a formal motion. And then it gets discussed, and then you will see if there's a form of consensus. But we've also seen that the president says now that even if the NEC says to him he needs to go, even if everybody on the NEC, he says, no, I'm not doing that. I want the branches who elected me to decide that. So he wants a national conference. So he's not going anywhere soon.